Well, we certainly do have to have His forgiveness, don't we? Hiram was his name. He grew up in the 1830s in a large family. And like many of us today, guns and hunting were a big deal to the family. Hiram was a little different. He was one of several children in the family, had other brothers, and he just did not take an interest in hunting. So much so that his family, he earned the nickname, and his family began to refer to him as useless. The family would depend on hunting. The family would depend on the boys going out and killing for their supper. This was a part of their survival. But Hiram was very good with guns. He loved to shoot. He was excellent marksman, and so it wasn't that. He just did not have the desire to kill anything. And he had been fed up, and he said, I've had enough of this. I'm going to shake off this reputation, and I'm going to go out, and I'm going to change this, and I'm going to go kill something. So he goes out, and lo and behold, he sees a turkey fly overhead. And then right behind it, he sees several other turkeys flying, and he just stares, and he gazes at the turkeys, and before he realizes it, he's looking at the flock as it's flying away from me, and he realizes that he never drew his gun and he didn't shoot anything. And he goes home, and he is once again still called useless by his family. Useless was actually a little bit of a play on words. His name was Ulysses, and his last name was Grant. And it's pretty ironic that this person, Ulysses S. Grant, one of the great generals of all time, did not want to kill an animal. I want you to open your Bibles this morning to the book of Mark chapter 5, and I want you to follow up on that little theme of being useless. We've all been there. We've all felt useless. We've all felt rejected. We have all felt alone, and we're going to look at a woman this morning who's lived that life, and she has nowhere to turn. Look at Mark chapter 5 and verse 25. It says, Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, Who touched my clothes? But his disciples said to him, You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, Who touched me? And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. For the next 5 or 6 weeks, I want to bring some messages to you about personal encounters with the Lord. And here is a great example of a very, very personal encounter. As you can already tell, and you probably know the story well, that the woman was desperate and she ended up having a very personal encounter. I want you to know, my goal over the next several weeks is this, is that you realize that you are not going to involve yourself in religion, and you are not going to be able to do this alone. A personal relationship with the Lord is required for fellowship with Him. It is a personal thing. I've titled the series, This is Personal, because that's what it's all about. It is not about religion. It's not about engaging with a group. It's not about the things that you do. This is a personal relationship with the Lord. At this point in Jesus' ministry, where we find our story today, He is constantly on the move. we see all the way back into chapter 4 of Mark that they're at the end of chapter 4, they're on a boat. And they go across the lake, and that is, while they're traveling, it is the storm that comes, and it is the disciples who are desperate, and Jesus speaks to the storm, and He calms the storm. And they end that chapter in verse 41 with, "What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the waves obey His will?" And then we come to chapter 5, and Jesus is on the other side of the lake, and He encounters the demoniac. And after that, He comes back across the lake. And now we see in this text today, He is not traveling by boat, but He is traveling by foot. He is traveling by foot in verse 25 because Jairus has come to Him and approached Him. His daughter is very ill. She is at the point of death. And he comes and comes to Jesus, and that's what Jesus is doing when we come to chapter 25. He is on the move. He is going to Jairus' daughter. But not only do we see Jesus on the move in this context, but we also see there is this theme of uncleanness. The demoniac, he is unclean. He is possessed by devils. He cannot be touched. He is ostracized. He is an outcast. And then we also see the woman here. She has some type of disorder, and she is unclean. She is not allowed to worship. Leviticus chapter 15 in verses 19 through 31 give you a background on her condition. She is unclean. But then we also see that Jairus' daughter will die. And a corpse, a dead body, is unclean. And so you see a series of 3 instances where Jesus confronts the unclean, yet He is able to heal, and He is able to overpower the uncleanness. He is able to make the unclean clean. As we come here in these opening verses, the first thing I want you to see is this rejected woman. The rejected woman. Look at the opening verses of verse 25 through about 28. And it says, "Now there was a certain woman," we don't know her name, do we? But she is a real person. She is a real person who is suffering. And it says that she has a flow of blood, some type of menstrual disorder. This goes on for 12 years. 12 years is a long time. 12 years is a significant part of your life. So for 12 years, she is experiencing this. And it says that she had suffered many things from many physicians. The first thing that jumps out to us is that she has a physical problem. Her physical problem is this disorder, but it also creates a spiritual issue. This spiritual issue prevents her from worshiping with the congregation. She is not allowed to go into the temple. If you look back at Leviticus, there's a whole procedure for how to deal with this. And the procedure is that when the flow of blood would stop, they would be able to go to the priest, and they were supposed to bring a sacrifice to make her clean. She is unclean. And may I stop right here and tell you this: apart from Jesus Christ, you are unclean. We can talk about all the pictures in the law about all the reasons that someone was unclean. If they did this, if they went over here, if they didn't do this, whatever they did, they may have been unclean. But spiritually, we are all unclean apart from Jesus. She is unclean. And we know the answer here. The answer is going to be Jesus. But she is rejected. She has a physical problem. She also has a spiritual problem, but she also has a financial problem. Read on and look what happened to her. She is broke and busted from this. It says she had suffered many things from many physicians. And Mark gives us the idea that these doctors had, you've heard that term, practicing medicine. Doctors don't have all the answers. Doctors they are practicing. They are sometimes experimenting. Sometimes they're trying things that they don't know whether they will work or not. And she had suffered many things from many physicians. She had turned to this doctor, and this doctor had said, well, let me try this, but it didn't work. And so she turns to another doctor, and the doctor says, let me try this, and it didn't work. And this goes on for 12 years, and she is suffering many things from many physicians, Nothing is working. There is nowhere to turn. She is rejected. Notice here in verse 27, when she heard about Jesus. She says, well, there might be hope in this person, Jesus. There may be something that Jesus can do. I have turned to the world. I have turned to all these things. But now she has decided to turn to Jesus. May I stop right here? Easy application, isn't it? When you finally get done with the world and playing in the world and turning to the things of the world, and you realize that there is no profit in this world, and the only thing that matters is your relationship to Jesus, turn to Him and be saved. She turns to Jesus. She's done trying all these things. And when she had heard about Jesus, then she turns to Him. She turned to Jesus. And notice the second thing I want you to see is the special woman. Notice what she said, that if only I may touch His clothes. And I need to pause for just a minute. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. There was a belief in that day that people, powerful people, leaders, Roman leaders, had special powers even in their garments. This was a belief of the day. We don't believe that today, but that's what they believed. And they thought that maybe I can just touch His clothes and I will be healed. Little does she know that who she is turning to is someone more than who she thinks He is. She thinks that if this I've heard about Him healing people. I've heard that He has power. I heard that He can do these things. Well, maybe this one I can touch His clothes. That's what she thinks. But notice right here in verse 29, immediately, it is a miracle. A miracle is not a process. A miracle can only be explained by the supernatural intervention of God, and it is immediate. It's instantaneous. It's not something that happens where I've had a scratch in my arm and it builds up a scab and it heals over the process of a week or two. That's not a miracle. That is a normal process. Anything that cannot be explained by a normal process, it's instant and it is a miracle. Immediately, the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. Notice that there is the immediate cure, and notice what happens next is that she realizes she has felt the effect of this, of what Jesus has done for her. She knows, I feel different than I have over the last 12 years. Something has changed in my body. I can recognize a difference. And then look at verse 30. And Jesus, immediately knowing in Himself that power had gone out of Him, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" I've always been fascinated by this text because of this question. I don't believe that Jesus did not know who touched Him. He knew. But no one in the crowd knew. The disciples emphasized this, and the story is highlighted by this question. Notice what the disciples say. The disciples said to Him, "You see the multitude thronging you," as He is leaving Jairus, and after Jairus is coming to Him, and He is going to Jairus' house, He is going through the streets, and the multitudes come around Him, and they are thronging against Him. There are many people pressing up against and touching His garment. There are many people that want to see what He is going to do, and the disciples ask a very logical question. What do you mean, who touched me? There's all kinds of people touching me. I want to stop right here because now I'm going to start preaching. Who touched me makes her a special person. He's providing an opportunity. He wants her to come out of the crowd. He wants to meet her. He wants to have a personal relationship with her. He wants everyone to know who touched Him. Because there is a lesson behind who has touched Him. Now notice this in verse 31. His disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And look in verse 32. And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. How do you know that Jesus knew who touched him? Because of verse 32. He was looking for her. I wish that I knew her name, because Jesus would say, "I'm looking for Elizabeth. Where is Elizabeth?" if that was her name. "I'm looking for Mary. Where is Mary? Where is she? Who touched me? Who is this one? Who is this one that has placed their faith and has reached out to me, who has turned away from the world and has turned to me? Who is she?" And what about all the other ones that are standing there? Good question. Who are you and who is she? That is the point. She is a special person because that Jesus is now, He is seeking her out. He is wanting to have a relationship, a personal encounter, because He has responded to her faith. Look at the last thing I want you to see is a new woman. In verse 33, "But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before Him and told Him the whole truth. And He said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction.'" It wasn't some type of magical power that came out of His clothes. Jesus says, "It was your faith that has made you well." I want to get to that in just a minute, but before we do, notice what the response of the woman is. It says that she was fearing and trembling. There's a couple of things that need to be said here, because when you have when you have a personal encounter with the Lord, when the Lord works in your life, when you are convicted of your sin and you place your faith in Him, even after you're a believer and you go to Him in desperation and you're turning to Him for help and God responds, all we can do is it's an incomprehensible awe of His great power in our life. She is fearing and trembling because she is in awe of His power. Everyone else she's ever turned to has not been able to do this thing. But now she turns to the Lord and she is in awe. Another secondary thing that she could be fearing and trembling is the fact of her uncleanness. What will Jesus say to me? She doesn't know yet, does she? She doesn't know if Jesus is going to scold her, is going to chide her, is going to send her away, what is He going to do? She's fearing and trembling. She doesn't know Him that well, but what she has done is she's placed her faith in Him. Notice what Jesus does say. He doesn't chide her. In fact, He uses a term of endearment, doesn't He? He says, "Daughter." It is a familial term, a family term. And He calls her a daughter. Now she is like a son of God. She is a daughter of God. She is a child of God. Daughter, your faith has made you well. It wasn't because that she was lucky. It wasn't that all of the people touching her that are touching Jesus and she reaches out at the right moment and receives some type of magical healing. That's not what it is. What was behind it, what motivated it, was her faith. And her faith motivated her to go to Him and reach out to Him, turn to Him and touch Him. And it says, "Your faith has made you well." That is what has made her well. But it gets even better. This last little phrase, "Go in peace." This word peace, it's from the Hebrew word shalom, which means more than two armies have quit fighting. It means so much more than that. It means so much more than you're in a dispute with your neighbor and now we don't fight anymore, we have peace. That's not what it means. In fact, that's not what it means at all. The word shalom, it means wholeness. What it means put back together and you are perfectly healthy. It means that you are living not just you are physically together, but also spiritually put together. How do we know the difference in the miracles between a physical healing and a spiritual conversion? Well, sometimes it's hard to tell. I do think that the elements are here for a salvation. He says, first of all, it is your faith that has made you well. And then second of all, he says, go in peace. You are whole. You are together. I want you to know that if you are not saved, that the first requisite for being saved is faith. You are to place your faith in the one who can respond. Not putting your faith in your own abilities or someone else's abilities or joining a certain type of denomination, but putting your faith in the one who can do something about it. It is the very one, and she didn't know this yet, it is the very one who would die on the cross for her sins. It was her faith in Jesus. Wholeness, put back together again, healthy. Not just physically healthy, because even today, if we are physically healthy, one day we are going to die. When you cross over into death's threshold and into eternity, it will be because of whether you are spiritually whole or spiritually dead that determines where you will spend eternity. I want to make an appeal to you. If you have not placed your faith in Jesus, place your faith in Jesus. You're not placing your faith in me. It wasn't because it was a good sermon, because it wasn't. It wasn't because of the great atmosphere, because that's not what it's about. It's not the name of the type of church on the sign. It is one who can do something about it. His name is Jesus. It's a personal thing. This is personal, isn't it? Notice what is also conveyed here, go in peace and be healed. It has the idea of a tense that means to get on with your life. Go on from here. From this point forward, go in peace and be healed. It's not just a one-time thing. It is a sustained change in her life. Sustained. Which means that she will never have to worry about this disorder again. And neither will she have to worry about her spiritual condition again. Be healed of your affliction. I want to close with this. As our musicians come and we prepare to have a song of invitation. Her faith is not all together by itself and the reason that she was saved. I want to be very clear today. Her faith was an indication of what was in her heart and her attitude towards looking to the one who can. I think I've said it 3 or 4 times. It's looking and turning to the one who could actually do something about it. He can. I can't. My friend can't do it. I can't do it. Only Jesus can. She turns to Him. And check this out. She placed her faith in Him, and God graciously responds to her and to you and to anyone when they place their faith. So without God's gracious response, this is really nothing, is it? But God responds, and Jesus says, go in peace and be healed. The last thing is this. He only has the authority to heal. He has the authority over all these physical things, and He has the authority over these spiritual things. Dear friend, if you are sitting there today and the Holy Spirit speaking to your heart, something is missing, something is off, I don't know, I am in doubt, then make it right today. You don't have to live in doubt. You don't have to live like you're walking a tightrope. You don't have to wonder where you're going to go when you die. You can be sure of it today. Go in peace and be healed, is what Jesus says. That's not a life of wondering. That's not a life of doubt. That is a certainty that you can hold in your heart. I'm going to ask you to stand right now, and we're going to have a song of invitation today, an opportunity to respond to the message as we stand.